Right, energy experts say there are 20 gigawatts of power projects in the pipeline that will help reduce blackouts. The country is currently experiencing stage 4 rolling blackouts. It's understood these projects will be able to reduce power cuts by 6 stages once they're added to the grid. A physics and energy researcher at the University of Johannesburg, Professor Hartmut Winkler, joins me now to discuss this further. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. So what kind of projects are we talking about here?
These would mainly be wind and solar projects. I haven't seen the exact breakdown, but that's typically what private developers are looking at.
And what grid connection capacity do we have to accommodate these projects at the moment? Because I understand that's a key sticking point.
Yes, there's a sticking point, and they can't at the moment put in anything new in the Northern Cape, and they can put a couple of things in the Western and Eastern Cape. There is, however, still a lot of access, especially in Mpumalanga and KZN, even Gauteng and so on. So if new projects of that nature come on board, I think there's going to be a lot of construction in those areas instead.
But to a certain degree, wind is excluded. Is that now the exclusion in the places that you've just mentioned where they've reached capacity of wind projects?
Yes, during the last round of bidding for these renewable energy independent power producer projects, no wind projects were awarded precisely for that region because the bidders all go to the areas where they expect the most wind, which is the Western and Eastern Cape. It should have been handled a bit better. I think those people that were interested in running projects should have been told up front that if they want to have any chance of succeeding, they should rather go to other provinces. And we might not think that we're in a windy place, but compared to some other places in the world which have quite successfully installed wind energy, we're not too bad at all. And KZN, for example, is very underdeveloped as far as wind is concerned.
So there is room for expansion in terms of wind?
There is, yes.
Okay, great. So sufficient to significantly reduce or even eliminate rolling blackouts. That's certainly a light at the end of the tunnel. But unfortunately, the majority of these products are still in the planning stages. So what kind of time frames are we looking at?
Yes, I think that's the problem. The headline suggests that this is around the corner. And true, these projects, once you start building them, they'll take 18 months to 2 years to complete. However, that's assuming that there's an unlimited number of construction companies and so on available to do all this. In reality, I think it's going to take more like 5 years. Yes, the first 2 projects are probably going to come online sooner than that, but I think to run something on a scale like that, I just don't think we have enough trained capacity in terms of building and so on. All that needs to go with it. Plus, it sounds like these projects are all in the starting blocks, just waiting to run out. In many cases, these were proposals which were presented and almost to book a spot, if you like, but a lot of the negotiation still has to happen. So some of them probably still need a year or 2 until they're actually at the point where they can start building.
And in terms of financing for these projects, are they pre-financed? Does it mean that once you enter a bid to, as you say, claim your spot, that you have the necessary capital to get up and going and to start construction once the green light is given? Or do they still have to go through that whole process of trying to secure funding to even get up and running?
I think that there'll be some for which that is the case, others where it's not. Certainly, finding funders is usually not that difficult, but it takes a while and so on. So it's in some cases, yes, these projects have been waiting for the go-ahead. There's other issues as well, like environmental impact assessments, which in many cases exist for a lot of the preferred sites, but they might need to be updated. So. As far as the stages of load shedding is concerned, 20 gigawatts sounds like a lot. It sounds, bearing in mind that 1 gigawatt is 1 stage of load shedding. However, because we're talking about solar and wind projects, this is what a solar farm or a wind farm will produce when the sun is high up in the sky and the wind is blowing. In reality, when we're dealing with wind and solar, we have to multiply, divide that capacity factor by about 4. That's why we're saying 5 to 6 stages of load shedding it would deal with.
You're saying also that we actually need as much as 30 gigawatts of alternate power, really.
Yes.
Why would that be?
because the existing problems that Eskom has been experiencing with the aging coal plants is not going to get much better. So as a result, I think if we just left everything as is, load shedding would naturally get worse, and we'd probably be, in 2 or 3 years' time, we'd be averaging stage 8 or so.
So as that infrastructure is decommissioned, we're going to have even bigger gap that needs to be
Yes, that's right, because a lot of these coal plants have been supposed to be decommissioned a while ago anyway, but they've been kept going because there was nothing else in place.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about wind and solar. Talk to us about the potential of battery storage projects, because that's also critical to longevity.
Yes, that's critical, especially because we might be lucky to have a very sunny day across most of the country, in which case the solar farms would really be doing extremely well. But that's not much use unless we can keep that into the evening and keep it for literally keep it for a cloudy day. So that's another aspect that's critical if we're ever going to reach a situation where the entire country can be run off renewables alone. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think maybe 20, 30 years' time we might be at that point.
Is that because the technology hasn't been developed yet?
The technology is there, but at the moment it's still expensive. So everybody's waiting for batteries to become, first of all, larger so that they can really absorb the sort of electricity we are talking about to run the whole country. And secondly, for the prices to come down. Right now, there are a couple of projects involving battery storage, but they're not nearly as cheap as just simply letting the solar farms and wind farms operate when they're best suited for that.
So obviously a lot of your research, is on this sort of large scale, the projects that are happening, but sort of on a very day-to-day level for a lot of our viewers out there, they'll be experiencing what we've reported about recently, where there's been a shortage of solar panels. So solar PV is challenging at the moment. Yes. People are paying exorbitant prices for products that aren't even in the country yet, yes. And for installers that have sprung up overnight. Yes. Are we close to finding sort of a more sustainable situation in terms of immediate access to alternate power on household level?
Yes, well, that certainly has been an issue this year. If one looks at the demand, and this has happened somehow very quietly, but I guess it's a natural reaction to the load shedding we have. If one looks around what many of the shopping malls have done, or many of the larger companies, or even some big farms, they've installed their own solar system. So if one looks around, it's quite a lot which has already happened. But now this has really become even bigger still. Now we're seeing the households moving into it. And if one thinks about it, most of these panels are imported. There's very little which is actually made in this country. Most of them come from China. Now, China had been slowed down because they had their COVID lockdown, and also because there was a lot of demand last year in Europe because of the energy crisis there. It may get a little bit better now, but I think one thing that the new energy minister, electricity minister, whoever it's going to be, could maybe do is use the connections to China to try and maybe get some sort of preferential import agreement. I think that could help, because that is going to be one of the bottlenecks, bringing in the new panels. The other one is yes, the installers. The reason why there's so many fly-by-nights is because there's not enough people that are able to do the job properly. I think there needs to be a concerted training program in place to train a lot more people to do that.
I suppose it's a bit of a catch-22 because, given our high unemployment figures, one would think, well, here's an ideal opportunity to manufacture solar panels in South Africa to help our own people, but we can't manufacture them without electricity, can we?
Yes, that's right. As I mentioned, there are two companies I'm aware of. They're both doing things nicely, but it's on a relatively small scale, much more to what one needs. So one almost needs some of the bigger companies to set up their own branches over here, or maybe some people to take the initiative. But yes, it's not that easy just to start a new factory now. I think doing so, if somebody really started from scratch now, maybe they'd be producing their first panels in 5 years' time. So that is a little bit of a slow option. Also, it's all coming at a bit of a rush right now, and one then needs to think about also, well, is this demand still going to be there in 10 years' time? Probably yes, but yeah, you never really know what might happen in the next 10 years. Might have a new source which is much better than solar. You never know.
And in terms of policy, to try and open the market for alternate power producers, are we getting to where we wanted to be now? Because a couple of months ago we saw PPPs saying, well, hang on, we want to provide, we want to plug into the system to feed electricity back into the grid, but we're not being allowed to do so at the rate that we want to. Have we seen a significant easing of those regulations?
I think it's happened, but there's still also a lot of opposition, which I'm not quite sure exactly what's causing it. I think it's partly really a mistrust of renewables. Yes, it is a completely new way of approaching the whole energy. Whether there's something else, certainly every time something new comes in, somebody old is going to be on the way out. And in this case, a lot of the country's tied to the coal industry, and clearly that's going to change and shrink now. So one can see where this opposition is coming from. At the moment, there are certainly voices in government, and I believe the president is one of those people who really sees the potential of this and wants to go that way. But not all his ministers share that point of view. I think
and we'll have to see whether the Minister of Electricity is once appointed, is going to be one of those ministers who shares that view and who continues to pave the road for a further opening of the market. Thank you very much for speaking to us. University of Johannesburg physics and energy researcher Professor Hartmut Winkler talking to us about 20 gigawatts of power projects, unfortunately not likely to provide us with immediate relief. 18 months to 5 years is the timeline by when we'll be seeing a reduction of stages of load shedding due to those independent power projects as they continue to plug into the grid.